Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Allant Group and HCL Unica for our webinar today, The Power of Unica in One Dashboard, featuring Gary Rosenfeld, Principal of Insights and Intelligence at Allant Group, and Tom Hannigan, Unica Global Practice Leader from HCL Unica. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping details to mention. Please be aware that we are recording this webinar. We will share the link to the recording with attendees following the webinar. All microphones for attendees have been muted. If you have a question, you can submit that question through the Q&A button. Depending on your screen setup, your Q&A button may appear at the top or bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, pull your mouse over and it should appear. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time and are not able to answer your question, we'll reach out personally to follow up. As mentioned previously, our presenters today are Gary Rosenfeld, Principal of Insights and Intelligence at Allant Group, and Tom Hannigan, Unica Global Practice Leader for HCL Unica. Gary is a marketing strategist, entrepreneur, and solutions analyst with a passion for enabling companies to stop relying on hunches and start making strategic marketing decisions with cutting-edge data and analytics. At Allant, Gary manages research, insights, and advanced analytical efforts for national clients. He brings a strategic marketing and campaign effectiveness mindset as he uncovers high ROI product and operational opportunities for his clients by mining business intelligence. Tom is a marketing practitioner with 20 years experience in data-driven marketing strategy, marketing automation, and customer relationship management. He has developed marketing automation, CRM strategies, and benchmarking analyses for clients like Nissan, Kimberly-Clark, GSK, UPS, Nokia, Cisco, Singtel, and Staples, among others. Tom holds a BA from Boston University and an MBA in International Finance from Babson. And with that, I'll hand off to Gary to get us started.
Thank you, Jill, and good morning to everyone. I appreciate everyone attending. Myself and others were super excited to kind of share with you what we've been working on and how it can provide some real value to your organization. I do have to say that it's incredibly cold out, so this is one of the few days that I'm super happy to be remote and not have to worry about warming up my car or driving anywhere. And I'm sure we're probably all feeling quite similar. But as Jill had mentioned, you're going to be hearing from myself and Tom about Unica and the Campaign Insights dashboard and how it leverages Unica's environment. But before I get into the dashboard, I do want to spend just a few minutes kind of sharing with you why we think this initiative is important, why dashboards are important, and the types of value that they can provide in general. So I've done quite a bit of research on my own, and the last time I checked, there's very few businesses that are rolling in cash with no accountability that's required. That's just not reality, and it never has been, and it never will be. In fact, really now more than ever, business leaders are insisting that every dollar that is spent, there is a value associated with that, which leads really to the first bullet on this particular slide, and that is the concept of dashboards. Is really good at optimizing your marketing resources, as well as the supporting technology underneath it, right? Every dollar that's spent is an investment, whether it's through a campaign or whether it's an investment in some kind of technology. And having dashboards available that can leverage the marketing resources that you've executed out into the world, as well as the technologies that you've invested in, are a great way to show the value of those dollars spent, right? And also, dashboards are really, really good at informing decisions. They are never a replacement, for hunches, which, everyone, gains through experience over the years. But when you make decisions and you can point to a particular item within a dashboard that validates or confirms that decision, that just makes the concept of the dashboard that much more important and useful. The third bullet point is around customization. No matter how hard we try, no dashboard off the shelf is going to satisfy all your business needs. And so it is super important that you can customize it to the way your business needs to consume this information, even down to the specific metrics that are displayed, as well as how the dashboard is even, designed. Does it align with your brand? Does it align with your brand identity? Is it showing the types of information that you need to be available to make those decisions? And then finally, speed to insights. This is absolutely critical today. Business moves super fast, life moves super fast, and it's important to have a tool available that's going to allow you to see the fruits of your marketing labors as quickly as possible and draw insights as quickly as possible and make adjustments as quickly as possible to keep the business flowing and to keep the value of those marketing dollars at the top of the ROI scale. Now, we also know that any dashboard is really only as good as the data that is underneath it, the data that supports it. And using Unica as the engine that drives this particular dashboard provides a great deal of flexibility here. And just here are some of the kind of the key points around that particular fact, right? So Unica in and of itself, allows for you to execute campaigns in a framework that matches your business's rules and the way you do business. And that type of flexibility can be reflected in the dashboard through the various customizations, as well as leveraging the environment that Unica provides. The campaign metadata, which is incredibly important to any type of reporting initiative, obviously needs to be accurate, obviously needs to be complete. And the amount of flexibility that Unica provides in describing the campaigns is outstanding and is then reflected in the granularity and the quality of the dashboards that are sitting on top of that. The third point is around contact and interaction histories at the individual level. Now, dashboards can share and display a lot of information. They can show channel metrics, but at the end of the day, they also need to show who's getting what and what are those people doing in response to this marketing outreach, right? So the Unica environment allows you to track those contacts, those interactions or activities at the individual level, and provides you the greatest amount of flexibility when it comes to reporting on them in the dashboard. And the last point is also critical, is the standardized tagging for capturing interactions across channels. We are in a day and age where it's all about multi-channel. Rarely does anyone do just direct mail or just email or just SMS. It's a combination of all of those things, and having the ability to draw on the data around all those particular channels and report on it through the dashboard is critical, and Unica allows that. And so for the purposes of this demonstration, we've prepared a dashboard with a series of different modules or sections, and each of those sections is meant to display a different type of information, right? So we have our high level and detailed metrics at a glance. Those are meant to be at the executive level who don't really feel like, deep diving, into the granularity of things to get a quick answer to the question, how is this campaign doing? We also have sections specifically around creative and messaging insights, right? So subject line testing or other things like that can be displayed and their performance compared. There's a section on channel engagement over time. So there's a bit of a time series analysis kind of embedded in there so you can understand how those things are happening day by day, week by week, month by month. There's a geographic component to it. And, this may not be always relevant to everyone, but depending on how you conduct your business, there may be a geographic view that you want to take a look at. But I think the most important point is the last one where I mentioned here kind of custom business metrics. I want to mention, and I'm going to constantly reiterate throughout this quick demonstration, that everything I'm going to show you is fully customizable, can be swapped out for other things depending on what your business needs are. And as I'd mentioned, the power of Unica underneath it provides a great deal of flexibility in order to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the dashboard itself. So I'm going to just shut off this real quick and jump over to the dashboard, go into full screen here. Okay. So let's get this out of the way. All right, so you can see that there are these different modules that we've kind of talked about here. So in the upper right-hand side, you have a series of global filters. And right now it's based on market, campaign, month, and audience. And each of these represent, some drop down or some additional level of granularity that you can use from a reporting perspective. And what we have here is really just the basics. More can be added, more can be swapped out depending on how you want to see this type of dashboard and what metrics are important to you. But again, the purpose of this is to globally change the entire dashboard to a specific audience, to a specific time frame, or to a specific campaign if you want to zero in on the details specific to that. So in terms of the kind of the overall content of the dashboard itself, we have this section here, which I call the kind of the key performance KPIs, right? And in this circumstance, we have emails, we have the number of opens, we have the number of clicks and conversions. Right now, they're represented as numbers. Certainly, they can be represented as percentages or both. And they're also specific to email in this circumstance. And there's no reason why that wouldn't have to be the only case here. Depending on the channels that you use as a business, that's what ultimately would be displayed here, right? And one of the key things I do want to call out is this concept of conversion. And every business has a different definition of what we mean or what they mean by conversion. Can it mean a purchase? Most likely, but it can mean many, many other things. It can be an inquiry, a download, a change of your preference setting, really any action that a customer or prospect can take. If it's captured within Unica's interaction tables, that can be defined as a conversion. And you don't need one conversion. Generally, campaigns can have multiple conversions that they're trying to elicit from the population that's being targeted. So I just want to be clear that this is incredibly customizable and is going to be unique to your specific business, and certainly can be accommodated here. So I just wanted to make that clear, which leads into the section on the upper right, which I'm calling incrementality. And this is really a very quick way of measuring the performance between two populations. In this circumstance, we're showing test and control. You know, there was a group of folks that received the email, and then there was a group of folks that didn't receive the email. And right now it's showing the difference between the conversion rates between those two populations. And again, while test and control is a common way of kind of representing what's going on within the campaign, it's certainly not the only way, right? There's lots of different subpopulations that you can take a look at on this particular dashboard. It can be a segment of the population. It can be an age group. It can be a creative approach. Anything that divides up the population into different segments can be applied here for a super quick way of measuring performance between those particular groups. So it's a really, really powerful section. And again, very customizable. The performance section is right here, is really where the meat of the dashboard lies. And right now we're showing results for 6 different campaigns. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can show certain, a number of deployments that fall under one campaign, or it can show a series of campaigns under a larger program. The point is here, it's customizable to present the results in a way that's most useful for you. And the metrics that are being shown here, in this case, we have the different campaigns, we have the test and control audience, we're showing emails, bounce rates, open rates, click-through rates, click to open, and conversion rates by campaigns. So it provides a super quick way of looking at campaign by campaign performance to see which ones are performing better than others. But in other circumstances, it could mean by deployment, saying, hey, deployment number 3 out of 6, I'm making that up, is where we see the rates start to fall, or we even see that's where it tends to max out before you start getting diminishing returns on future deployments or future campaigns. So it's a great way of getting the lay of the land and getting kind of a holistic picture of what's going on with your marketing. Moving to the right here, this is the creative section. And right now we're showing results by subject line, specifically to an email. And again, it doesn't have to be just the subject line that's shown here. It could be anything from different calls to action that are embedded in an email. different images that were embedded in the email, different messaging content, even URL click performance can be put in here and the associated metrics applied. So there's a great deal of flexibility to drill down into the content of your channels and call out specific tests that may be in play or certain things that you may be interested in understanding. It's a really, really easy and quick way to understand that. And obviously, the metrics that are applied are going to be specific to what we're talking about here, right? A subject line test, you know, there may not be a need to show a certain metric, right? Open rate is probably super important from a subject line testing, where if you're showing different creative versions or different images or calls to action, then click activity is probably more relevant there, and certainly can be applied to this view quite easily to provide that kind of value. Moving down to the lower left, we have the time series component here. And we all know that campaigns have a life cycle. And there's a time when the campaign results tend to ramp up, and there's a time when those results start to drop off. And this is a great way to pick out a certain set of metrics and understand what that dynamic is over time. When does it start to ramp up? When does it start to end? Also, it shows if there are any external factors that can be influencing the performance of the campaign. Obviously, seasonality is important, and there's no limit to the amount of time that you can apply here to see, you know, what that activity is doing over time. It can indicate if there's issue with the weather, if there's issues with the economy, if there's competitive activity. Basically, it allows you to isolate anomalies and zero in and say, what happened here? Why was there such a big spike, you know, at this point, and it was flat prior to that? Those are clues to dive into a little bit deeper. And again, depending on the detail that's provided in the campaign metadata and the information that's available within Unica, you can add additional granularity to this and additional filters to zero in on what the potential causes for that might ultimately be. Right. So it's a really, really great way to kind of understand what's going on over time, because as we know, campaigns are executed over time, and it's important to understand that dynamic going forward. And finally, we have the geographic section here. And not every business markets at the geographic level. They may not be interested at the geographic level. In this particular circumstance, the client that we were kind of referencing is interested in that geographic cut. And so this dashboard allows them to zero in on particular markets that may be of interest, that may be performing better than others, and providing clues as to why certain markets may be performing better and things you might want to dive into a little bit more. Particularly when you use the global drop downs here, you may see that the certain subject lines are working better in certain markets, right? Or the time series, or, you know, the over the time performance of the campaign differs from market to market, indicating you're going to need a more granular approach to the way you structure, plan, and strategize your marketing outreach. So again, really, really quick and easy way to understand that dynamic, but also absolutely customizable. If there's another way you want to take a look at how your marketing is doing, if there's a different way you want to look at that, if there's different cuts that you want to see, it doesn't have to be geographic. It can really be anything that you want. I thought geography in this case was super interesting and provides a great deal of insight. But the key takeaway here, again, is that this is the baseline and fully customizable to match your particular business needs. So that's kind of the base dashboard in a nutshell, right? It's a clean, it's fully customizable, and it's really a great foundation, right, to leverage all the detail that Unica provides. And certainly it's important to understand with any dashboard the data that drives it a little bit better. So I want to kind of hand the reins over to Tom now, and he's going to get more into about Unica, how it works, what the architecture is underneath it, and how its level of granularity and flexibility can really propel these dashboards to the next level. So Tom, I'm going to relinquish control now, and you can take over.
All right, great. Thanks, Gary. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for everybody attending today. We're going to talk about the back end of this now and really how you approach using Unica and configuring it from a practitioner standpoint to actually produce the data to get that high value dashboard that Gary just showed. So long before we ever put hands on keyboards with Unica, we think about 3 business value pillars. And these are the conversations we have with clients every day. So the first one is around marketing strategy alignment. So Gary was talking about features in Unica where you can configure it to reflect how your business is set up, how you run marketing, and then how you report things in your dashboard. So we try to make sure we have that marketing strategy alignment first and foremost. The second one is really about data, and then in a lot of cases, the underlying technical architecture to then provide Unica with the data it needs to execute campaigns, execute against audiences, execute and understand geography and things like that, and what product the campaign is for. So having all that data available is critical. And then the third one is what we call operational posture. So if you execute campaigns in a very consistent way and you're operating according to standards, you'll find that your dashboards will be much cleaner and much more consistent across, say, lines of business or brands. Whereas if you have inconsistent operating posture, your data becomes that much harder to wrangle because your execution is not standardized. So marketing strategy alignment, data and technical architecture, and operational posture are the 3 conversations we have long before a dashboard ever gets built. To give you an idea, Gary's referring to this campaign execution framework. Here's what it looks like. So at the highest level, you have plans. And in general, plans are associated with a budget holding entity. So maybe a line of business within the organization has a plan. Different brands can have plans. Or different marketing teams. So banks typically have an acquisition team, a retention team, and a loyalty team. So each one would have its own plan. Within a plan, you have major programs. So a program would represent a major marketing initiative that might happen throughout the year. It again is going to have its own budget and ROI associated with it. And then you have projects and campaigns. So a project is a way of specifying a body of work in marketing that you may then execute using Unica, and it will be rendered as a campaign at that point. And then the next level down is really about offers. So offers are how you target audiences with promotional messages. And as you execute campaigns, when an individual is assigned an offer, they become part of an offer cell. So Gary was showing you test versus control. Those are 2 offer cells. So this is the organizing principle for a campaign execution framework in Unica. The names are sort of what they are, but the configurability of it and the metadata you capture is highly configurable for your marketing needs and to fit the way you run your business and the business of marketing. And then lastly, Unica keeps track of campaign calendar, and this helps answer a question in the dashboard as well around when am I too market heavy with my marketing execution plans and where am I light and how do I fill in those gaps? So the calendar is great for that. And again, that can all be rendered in the dashboard as Gary was showing you. So the next bit is really, how does Unica actually make this stuff work? So what I thought I'd do is just the highest level, explain how you get that output on the right-hand side into your analytics tools. So we start on the left-hand side and say all marketing, doesn't matter what industry you're in, this happens to be a banking example, but it could be anything. Marketing has inputs and outputs to achieve those outcomes. So the inputs are things like campaigns and budgets, individual and account data, interaction and transaction history data, permissions and preferences. In this case, if you're a bank, you've got some kind of online banking presence, and you've also got probably a mobile app to do banking. And then increasingly, our clients are coming up to us with real-time trigger buses that they've built and things like Kafka. And they're saying, how do I trigger off of those real-time signals that I'm getting? On the right-hand side, you have the outputs. So one output is that marketing framework, which really describes what your dashboard's going to look like according to how your marketing department is set up. You're going to have marketable audiences. So you've all got all this rich data on individuals you want to target. Well, ultimately, that output is a marketable audience segment that then you're going to deliver messaging for. When it comes to your online banking and in-app work, you're delivering real-time messages right within the app as somebody's transacting with the application itself. And then for those real-time triggers, It's really around triggering a journey. And you think of an example of somebody abandons an application for a credit card, where you're going to want to trigger a real-time journey to bring them back in to finish that application so you can issue the card. And as you might imagine, Unica sits squarely right in the middle of that. And you can think of it as our gigantic throughput engine. I won't go into the detail, but there are various modules you use to accomplish that throughput. So Plan is going to give you that marketing framework. Campaign is going to deliver those marketing audience segments. Interact is going to deliver your real-time messages, and Journey is going to deliver your real-time journeys. So think of that as your whole operational ecosystem for running marketing. Now the magic is at the bottom in yellow. So as you're running all of this machinery and you have all these teams creating campaigns and executing in market against all of these audiences, Unica is doing three things that are critical in the background. So the first one, and Gary mentioned this, you're capturing campaign metadata. So before you even run a campaign, you go in and define it. Define your plan, define your program, define your project, it becomes a campaign. Every step of the way, you can set up configurable fields to capture metadata. What product is this campaign for? What geography is going to run it? What marketing team owns it? What budget is associated with it? All of those questions can be answered from the campaign metadata and then rendered in the dashboard as Gary was showing you. Contact history and interaction history. So who did what and when did they do it? Who got what and when did they get it? And then touch management. So Unica has very powerful tools to be able to make sure that you're not over touching or under touching or fatiguing your audience. So that is the underlying rich data that Unica is creating as you operate campaigns automatically across all campaigns, all lines of business, all brands, to then keep track of to stage for your dashboard, which you can see is in the upper right. A little more detail on this, and I would agree with Gary. We try to capture this at the individual ID. In this case, we're referencing a customer ID. So as we go to set up to send you that email or message you in app or message you at a kiosk, we're keeping track of all of that stuff at your customer ID level. Then tracking against that from the contact history side, it's, well, what campaign was that part of? What treatment, creative treatment did you receive? What channel did we deliver it in? And then what was the interaction point we delivered it through? So was it on the credit card transaction page of the mobile app? And then Unica is also tracking all the subsequent interactions. So if we serve you up an offer and a message, Interact is going to track, what did you do? Did you move away from it, or did you actually interact with that creative, accept the offer? And then that is how we measure the conversion that Gary was showing you. And you can see some of the other metadata we're capturing there around what channel did you respond to? Because you may not respond to the same channel we reached out to you in. What was the product for? What type of response was it? So these are all of the things that Unica is capturing in that underlying data that then becomes the backbone of the dashboard. And then the last thing Gary referred to was tagging. So we have a lot of clients who go to great pains to set up Unica in a very, very precise way, but that last mile of execution they forget about. So in this case, we're showing you an example of a standardized tag. And you might use this in a link in an email. You might use it associated with some kind of creative treatment you're showing in your online store, at checkout in your shopping cart, where you're delivering a creative treatment and tracking it in a very standardized way. And then we are including in ours the Unica generated campaign code and the Unica generated offer code. Because again, you have all of that rich metadata around, if the campaign code is in here, I can then infer what product this was from the campaign metadata sitting under Unica. So we always recommend standardizing and defining what are each of the placements in your tags so that you can parse them up in your digital analytics system as it's firing these tags and really understand your campaign performance. And in a lot of these scenarios, you can do it in near real time. Just to give you a real practical example of what this actually looks like in practice. This is examples we made up, but is typical of some of the clients we deal with, where the first thing you'll notice is the URLs are not similar at all. Some are really long, some are really short. You'll also notice there are some attempts here to make sense of what the creative treatment is. So you see on the first one, it has BOGO embedded into the URL. That's somebody's attempt to try to measure a type of campaign, a buy one, get one. However, you have a buy one, get one right next to it, and it isn't tagged as BOGO, so you can't really compare the two in a dashboard. And the second thing is this one has more information around clothing. So it looks like they were trying to infer from here what that clothing was that they want to then measure. But you can imagine if you viewed this in a dashboard, these two things would not be able to be compared to each other because they're so different. On the right, you have another lack of consistency where the actual creative treatment talks about clearance, but the tag says 2-day sale. So in that case, you're going to end up with a misunderstanding of what you were actually tracking and what the performance was. And then the last one on the far right is not consistent with the other one, which also talks about savings and clearance. So again, if you were trying to define how your clearance message works or messaging works, how could you compare these two things? Because they're not sharing a common tag strategy. So what we did here is we gave you an example of what those tags would look like in after mode. So you can see we're using the campaign and offer codes to track performance, and it's embedded in the same spot in the URL in every single case. And those other placement definitions are also very consistent. So you can see we have BOGO built into both. So not only will we know what campaigns they were associated with, we'll also know that they were for BOGO. And then on the right, we didn't change so much what was actually in the URL as much as we did standardize on the campaign and offer codes. And we're going to infer from there things like what product was it for, what geo was it for, what marketing team initiated it. So that gives you a sense of what standardized tags look like in a before and after mode. So just to kind of summarize this from a best practices standpoint, Unica definitely does have the potential to be the backbone, that real rock solid set of data that you're using and you can rely on for your marketing dashboard. So you've got that campaign execution framework that's structured the way that marketing is set up and the way that marketing wants to view campaigns, drill down into campaigns, filter, and roll up and report your results. That campaign metadata allows you to then roll campaigns up because you have plans and programs sitting above them. So if you're everyone from the CMO on down, you can start by saying, well, I'm the CMO. I want to understand how all of my marketing is working. And you're able to do that because you might have one or two plans that you can use to look at that. Also, when you're making budget decisions, you're probably going to be making that as a CMO at the program level. To look at what that big program is going to look like throughout the year and what you're going to invest in it, and then what are the results. And Gary gave you a feel of what some of those views look like. But we both talked a lot about contact and interaction history. So that really sits at the core of it, is really tracking on an individual data or individual person level what all of that contact history looks like and that interaction history looks like. That then gets aligned to what you've defined as those campaigns. And that's where those roll-ups that Gary was showing you by geography, by audience come from. And then the last thing we talked about is just standardizing those tags to really make sure that you're capturing all campaign related interactions in digital channels. Without standards around tags, it's very, very hard to make sense of that stuff after the fact. And I'm sure Gary could share with you stories of getting into the underlying data and actually having to go back to the client and say, sorry, but a lot of your historical stuff isn't going to be very meaningful because it doesn't accurately capture information that can be tied back to those campaigns. So that really leaves us with that last point. Marketing dashboards are only as good as the data that's behind them. And we always try to spend a lot of time thinking about, from a Unica perspective, what data can we manufacture that then will best serve those views that you want to render in a dashboard.
Thank you very much, Tom and Gary, for the excellent presentation. We do have a couple of questions that we can address in our remaining time. The first one is, how long does it take to build a system like this?
I'll take that one. That's a great question. I would say on average, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And the factors that will typically influence that timeline is, how your campaign is structured, what channels are being used, what metrics are going to be important to you, how granular you want to get within the dashboard, what types of filtering and drill down you're ultimately going to want. and then obviously how you define conversion, where that data sits, and how those calculations occur. But generally between 4 to 6 weeks is about the average, obviously depending on some of these factors here.
Great. And how do you consolidate data when you've got it coming from multiple sources?
Yeah, I can take that one, Jill. So basically, it's pretty common practice that you are going to have multiple sources. And especially with the explosion in MarTech technology, it's probably getting worse, not better. What a lot of our clients have been working on for the last year or so, I'd say it's really picked up, is what's called the CDP, or Customer Data Platform. And CDPs are designed to do, well, they can do a lot of things, but at their core, one is identity management. So you're starting now to capture data anonymously and cookie behavior, all the way through to customer interaction data, as a logged in customer to, say, my online banking site. So we call that cookies to customer. And the idea is you can deploy a CDP to pull in data from the different systems that capture that behavior and those interactions, and then use the CDP to perform that identity resolution. That then becomes meaningful from a Unica perspective, because we could say, okay, well, if I have cookie data, I can target that person anonymously on a website or in other third-party sites. And then if I also can associate them with an account, then I can use that anonymous behavioral data to follow up in known identified channels like in-app or through email. The second big chunk of data is really around those transactions that are meaningful to measure conversion. That might come from your e-commerce site. It might come from, again, your online banking site. And we're bringing in those transactions to then marry those up as well, tie them to the same common campaign codes, so that we can look at an audience we targeted, as well as an audience that we converted through, that Gary was showing you on the dashboard.
Fantastic. Okay, so I don't see any other questions for the time being, but if any come up later that weren't addressed, please feel free to reach out directly. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today, and thanks again to Gary and Tom for their presentations. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.